Well, let's talk to Mick Mulroy, who's a former US Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Middle East. Good evening to you, Mick.
Good to be with you again, Carol.
It's great to have you with us. It's very rare for President Trump to openly criticize Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister. That statement does say that he doesn't think that that attack helps the aims of either Israel or the United States. He talks about it being very unfortunate that it was on Qatari soil. What do you make of the statement that has been put out that we've heard from his press secretary?
Well, coming from President Trump about Israel, I think that is a pretty strong statement. The Qataris are a major non-NATO ally of the United States. LOD base is our biggest air base in the Middle East. We have the command headquarters for Central Command in Qatar. It is incredibly important. And of course, they were hosting, at our request, the negotiations to try to end the conflict in Gaza, and in the middle of trying to relay a proposal from the United States to enter into a ceasefire. So it's clear to me that the U.S. did not support this strike, and they were formed basically at the last minute. So I think Israel can say that they actually did tell the U.S. ahead of time.
But given that, as you say, those Hamas leaders were there in Doha to talk about the peace plan, which had been put forward by President Trump and his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, it does seem to be a really, almost a literally an attempt by the Israeli leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, just to destroy any hopes of that peace plan getting anywhere.
You certainly could make the argument. I don't think there's any tears being shed for Hamas leaders that are killed, but these are the ones that were designated and essentially approved to do the negotiations. Now that they are dead, or at least most of them, it's very unlikely that they'll have a ceasefire. And the ones that remain, and we're unclear of who was actually killed in this strike, but if it goes simply to the leaders in Gaza, they have made it clear that they will not agree to any ceasefire. So this makes the chances of a successful recovery of a live hostage go down substantially, which is going to cause a lot of concern inside Israel, especially, of course, with the hostages' families, but all those that support an end to this conflict and return of these hostages alive have to see this as a bad move by the Israelis. One, I mean, they could have tracked these individuals down later, but this seriously disrupted, if not ended, the ceasefire negotiations.
Do you think this is really just because Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't want the war to end? He's got his own personal political reasons that he feels he can probably only stay in power as long as the war is continuing?
It's possible, because this is likely going to cause the conflict to extend. They're not going to accept a ceasefire agreement now. I'm not even sure who would be doing that. And it's clear that it didn't advance, as this was stated by the spokesperson of the White House, it didn't advance Israel's strategic interest in defeating Hamas completely, ending the war and bringing back their hostages. If anything, it made it less likely that these hostages that are still alive, potentially up to 20, coming back alive. So I think there's going to be there's obviously a lot of international pressure, including by the White House, the United States, which is unusual. But there's going to be a lot of pressure inside Israel, both for those that would like to see this war come to an end completely, but those who would like to see these hostages come back alive are going to likely make themselves known here in the next few days. This is going to put a lot of pressure on the Netanyahu government.
Is there any prospect of President Trump taking any further steps to try to show his displeasure at Benjamin Netanyahu?
So I don't know what else they would do. I don't think there'll be any interest in any kind of, cutting off of security assistance or even moderating it. That's simply not likely to happen, especially because of the constant threat from Iran. And the U.S., of course, is and will remain a strong partner to Israel. But this is balancing two key allies in the region. And it's also going to potentially cause issues with any kind of diplomatic expansion of the Abraham Accords. That was a big success of the first Trump administration. This could even challenge those that are already in it, like the United Arab Emirates, and whether they'll stay in the agreement, let alone expand it to any other countries. So I think from the U.S. perspective, particularly the White House, this was a mistake on many levels, and it didn't. In just killing some Hamas leaders was not worth the diplomatic issues that it caused and the setback of the ceasefire negotiations that are likely to come as a result of this.
Yeah, this latest statement from President Trump on Truth Social says that when he was notified of the attack, it was unfortunately too late to stop the attack. He says he views Qatar as a strong ally and friend of the US and feels very badly about the location of the attack. And he goes on to say that he wants all the hostages released and the war to end now. But he then goes on to say that I believe this unfortunate incident could serve as an opportunity for peace. It's difficult to see how it can possibly be that opportunity, isn't it?
So that's a very optimistic stance. I would agree with that. But I'd also point out that the notifying of the U.S. military, that happened a lot when I was in the Pentagon, that's usually about coordination. For example, if Israel is going to do a strike in some remote area of Syria, they would inform the U.S. military, so we know that that's them flying in that area. But it's not intended to be any kind of political notification, and there is some time lapse, even with the expediency of the U.S. military in informing the White House. So they might have decided to simply go through the military as a way not to give the White House the ability to weigh in time to say, do not do this strike. The military is not authorized to speak for the U.S. government and say, don't do this strike. They simply are there for coordination. I believe going through this means, and not just going straight to the White House, was a way to delay this to the point where the White House could not actually have time to oppose this. And I think that's essentially what President Trump was also saying in these posts.
One of our listeners, John's got in touch, says Trump's problem is that both Netanyahu and Putin have contempt for him and ignore him. I mean, it does seem as though Benjamin Netanyahu, I mean, we've seen him certainly not heed any warnings from any other political leaders. It seems as though he doesn't even care what the White House thinks now, even though, I mean, Israel is still dependent on US military support.
Yes, a substantial portion of their national defense comes from funds from the United States. But I don't think either party, the last administration, the Biden administration, or the Trump administration, is willing to use that as a leverage point. And I think Prime Minister Netanyahu views his political survivability as more important than bucking the desire of either President Biden or President Trump. He essentially has to appease certain far-right elements of his cabinet to stay in power, and they want to see these type of strikes happen, and they want to see the Gaza war continue, and they would like to see annexations of certain parts of the West Bank. The question is whether the United States is willing to really throw that security assistance we provide on the table as an option to get that influence. And so far, I don't think there's a desire on either side of the political aisle in the United States to do so.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly looks as though Netanyahu has calculated that he's going to keep that US support no matter what, so he can continue with his own military and political goals.
That's right. We've seen the IDF leadership say that they have essentially accomplished every military goal that they can accomplish in Gaza, and all the way up to include the chief of staff in opposition to the current plan to take Gaza City. So this is really, in my estimation, if you take out the military necessity, as said by the actual military leaders of Israel, this is a political desire by Prime Minister Netanyahu to appease a certain element of his cabinet, and that is to continue the war and essentially stay there potentially permanently, but not something that the IDF, who's been very vocal in a very odd way, not odd, but certainly unprecedented way of leaking to the press that they are opposed to the current opposition operation in Gaza City. So I think this is entirely Prime Minister Netanyahu focusing on his political future.
Mick Mulroy, former US Assistant Secretary of Defense for